On my birthday, they took me to the cemetery. "Mom, we bought you a spot under that tall tree," my son said as if it were the most thoughtful gift. "You always loved hiding in the shade, so you'll like it here. Your grave will be the fourth one from the fence. There's plenty of room. If you want, we can place Dad right beside you." I froze, my skin crawling. My daughter-in-law Beth, an immigrant who had never hidden her contempt for me, handed me a set of documents. "We already paid for everything," she said sweetly, almost mockingly. "Congratulations, Susan. You're now the proud owner of a burial plot." I felt the ground shift under me. My birthday. Instead of flowers, cake, or warm wishes, I got a death sentence. I called an Uber right there in front of them. I couldn't sit in the same car on the way home. My instinct screamed, they want me dead. And they're not even hiding it anymore. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Susan. I'm 58 years old, and I live with my husband in a sprawling mansion in Connecticut, a house with 12 rooms, a garden full of roses, and memories embedded in every corner. This home was our dream. We built it from the ground up with sweat, long nights, and decades of discipline. We didn't inherit it, we earned it. And now our only son wants to rip it away from us. His excuse? He's our only heir. He insists that it's time we hand the mansion over to him and move to the old summer cottage on the outskirts of the city, a place no one has lived in for 20 years, where the pipes groan, the roof leaks, and silence hangs heavy in the air. "You don't need 12 rooms," he tells me every Sunday after church when he and Beth come for lunch. "You and Dad are old. 2 bedrooms are enough. Give us the mansion. Once we have it, Beth and I will finally be ready to start a family." Every meal ends the same way, voices raised, tempers flaring, forks clattering against china. My husband and I hold our ground. "If you want a house, take out a mortgage, work for it like we did. Build your own life." But our son doesn't want to work. He doesn't want to sacrifice. He already lives in the New York apartment I inherited from my grandmother, a cozy 2-bedroom with parquet floors and a view of the Hudson. Instead of being grateful, he plotted to secretly rent it out. And not to just anyone. He found a photographer willing to pay 3 times the market price to film adult videos there. Yes, in my grandmother's apartment. In the place where I once painted Easter eggs with her as a little girl, where we celebrated birthdays, where her rocking chair still creaks in the corner. I only discovered it when the neighbors started calling me, horrified, complaining about unacceptable noises. I drove to the city myself, opened the door with my spare key, and there it was, bright lights, cameras, and 2 strangers in lingerie lounging in my living room. I threw everyone out. I demanded my keys back from my son. His reaction? He threatened me. "You cost me 6 months of rent, Mom. They already paid up front. You owe me the money now. You'll pay it back or what?" I asked, trembling but unbroken. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. I saw it in his eyes. I hired a lawyer. The so-called tenants didn't see a dime. But that was the moment I realized something terrifying. My son wasn't just selfish. He was dangerous. And Beth was worse. She once whispered in my ear, "If I were you, I'd put a lock on your fridge. You never know who might slip something into your milk." I laughed it off then. But after my birthday gift at the cemetery, I don't laugh anymore. They drove me there in a gleaming black Mercedes wrapped in a red bow. At first, I thought foolishly that maybe, just maybe, my son had finally done something kind. That the car was for me. But no, it was Beth's present. He gave it to her that morning. And they used it to chauffeur me straight to my future grave. Standing between tombstones, they made their demand clear. "If you don't want to end up here before New Year's," my son said coldly, "give us the house. You don't need it. Don't dig your own grave. Just hand me the keys." My hands shook, but my mind sharpened like glass. That was the moment I decided. They wanted war. Very well. But they had no idea who they were fighting. Because I, Susan, am not only a mother. I am also a woman who knows how to strike back, with elegance, precision, and vengeance that cuts deeper than any knife. I didn't cry on the Uber ride home. I pressed my palms to my knees and watched the world slide by: trees, mailboxes, a dog tugging a child across a crosswalk, as if life refused to bow before the burial they'd staged for me. By the time the driver pulled past our wrought iron gate, my heartbeat had steadied into something colder. Precision replaced pain. If they wanted to play architect of my ending, I would redesign the blueprint. Beth had always underestimated me, mistaking quiet for weakness, politeness for surrender. "I'd put a lock on your fridge," she'd murmured a month earlier, eyes bright, voice syrup slow. "You never know who might slip something into your milk." It used to feel like theater. Now I filed it away as evidence. I didn't tell my husband everything. Not yet. He saw my face when I came in and reached for my hands. "You're trembling." "I'm drawing a line," I said. "And I'm not stepping over it." "They are." That night, I climbed to the third floor, to the room our son had once covered in band posters and football pennants. In the closet, behind a crate of high school trophies, sat the old gray laptop he'd abandoned when he upgraded. It had dust like velvet. I carried it to the desk, brushed it with my sleeve, and pressed the power button. It whirred alive, loyal as an old hunting dog. The login password prompt blinked. I tried the obvious: his birthday. Denied. The name of his first car. Denied. The team mascot. Click. The screen bloomed. I wasn't there to hack. I was there to remember. To understand who my son had become and why. But the machine gave me more than I expected: tidy folders labeled taxes, drafts, portfolio. Another, buried under archive, named B. Inside, subfolders: Africa trip, engagement ideas, Beth, portfolio. I paused. I opened it. They weren't scandals so much as intention: art school nudity, a series of black and white sessions from 6, 7 years ago. Beth, younger, daring, framed like marble. They were beautiful in their own right. But in her world now, a senior manager with a morality clause baked into her contract, beauty could be grounds for dismissal. She'd bragged about her company's code of conduct at dinner once, how severely they punished anything that might impair public trust. I'd smiled and served more potatoes. A part of me wanted to close the laptop and forget I'd seen any of it. Another part, older, bruised, and now wide awake, remembered the cemetery. The tree. The plot. The sentence pronounced as a gift. I didn't rush. I made tea. I read. I took notes. I called my attorney the next morning and asked one question: where is the line? He reminded me what I already knew. Public is public. Anonymous is legal, if not kind. I thanked him and hung up. The plan needed 3 things: timing, distance, and silence. Timing, because storms should break when the sky is most crowded. Distance, so nothing could be traced to me. Silence, because the loudest revenge is the one that doesn't shout. Beth loved Mondays. She lined her wins up at dawn like trophies. So I chose a Monday. While the hydrangeas outside breathed blue into the morning, I set a kettle on, logged into a throwaway account from a cafe Wi-Fi, and uploaded 3 photographs to a forum that was neither mainstream nor obscure, just hungry enough to pass a spark from one dry field to another. I didn't add her full name. I didn't need to. The internet is a bloodhound. It finds scent in shadows. I included a single sentence: recognize this rising executive from a Fortune 500 partner? Guess where these are from? I closed the laptop. I walked the long loop around the lake. By the time I returned, the spark had learned to run. At 10:42 a.m., our home line rang. Caller ID, corporate office. I let it go to voicemail out of principle. At 10:47, my son's name flashed. I answered. "What did you do?" he demanded, breath quick, voice pitched high. "I'm pruning roses," I said, watching a cardinal land on the fence. "What did you do?" "I swear to God, Mom." "Careful," I said, gentle as a finger on a matchbook. "You might want to record this for your HR training." He hung up. 2 minutes later, Beth called from a blocked number. She didn't bother with greetings. "You vile, provincial," she ran out of adjectives and started over. "Do you know what you've done?" "My contract, my board." "The same contract that forbids explicit personal branding that could harm the company's reputation?" I offered. I think I heard you recite that clause between dessert and coffee last Easter. You think this scares me? She tried a laugh that broke midair. You should be more careful with your groceries, Susan. Open fridges. Unlocked windows. Accidents happen. The old threat, dressed in new clothes. I let the silence between us become a mirror so she could see her face in it. It's a pity, I said finally. The photos were beautiful. You were brave once. Somewhere along the way, bravery curdled into cruelty. I'm just returning a few things to their proper owners. This is illegal, she hissed. So was filming in my grandmother's living room, I said, and ended the call. By noon, the photos had crossed the invisible border where gossip becomes concern. Beth disappeared from her team chat. The black Mercedes stayed parked in front of their building all afternoon. At 3:15 p.m., my son texted a single word, monster. I replied with a heart. I didn't celebrate. Revenge isn't champagne, it's discipline. I cooked chicken soup. I watered the ferns. I wrote down everything I could remember about the cemetery visit, the words they'd used, the way my son's mouth barely moved when he threatened me. Then I opened a little leather notebook and labeled a fresh page, Phase 2, the boy I raised. If Beth was a performance, my son was a pattern, entitlement varnished to a shine. Patterns don't break with a single tap, they crack along the seam you press the longest. I made a list. Tuition, mine to pay, so mine to end. Car, mine to buy, so mine to reclaim. The calls, his threats, recorded by habit the day the neighbors first phoned me about the Hudson apartment. I had files organized by date, time, and subject like drawers in a legal cabinet. Not because I wanted to use them, but because mothers keep receipts when love keeps being returned stamped insufficient funds. At dinner, I told my husband part of the plan. No more tuition, I said. No more car. And I'm going to publish certain voicemails. Not under my name. He watched me the way a captain watches cloud shape on the horizon. He'll come for you. He already did, I said. With a shovel and a ribbon. He placed his hand over mine. Then we won't flinch. The next morning, I drafted the email to the bursar's office. Calm, factual, final. I printed the lien release and scheduled an appointment at the dealership to transfer the vehicle back into my name. I chose a simple, untraceable channel to seed the audio files of my son's threats where the industry he worked in paid close attention, a forum for logistics professionals that prided itself on safety culture. He'd spoken carelessly about falsifying logs once, about threatening to make a problem go away. Ethics officers love cautionary tales with receipts. Before I hit send on any of it, I looked out the window at the dogwood tree my husband planted for our 20th anniversary. White petals like folded handkerchiefs. You can punish in anger. Or you can protect in clarity. I chose clarity. I clicked. By afternoon, the bursar replied with a terse confirmed. The dealership booked me for Friday. And the logistics forum? The moderators pinned the audio under a thread titled, Conduct Unbecoming. What do you do when a supervisor crosses the line? Comments multiplied like summer flies. None of it used his name. All of it knew exactly who it was. At 6:08 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it was my husband, standing in the doorway with a letter in his hand. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. It's from a friend, he said. An attorney. He saw something today he thought I should see. He handed me the envelope. Inside was a note, crisp as a verdict. There are other lists besides the internet's. Some are quiet. Some are permanent. If you want them on every one of them, say the word. I looked up at my husband. He looked back at me with the unblinking love of a man who has watched his wife be marched to her grave and brought back by her own spine. Phase 3, he said softly. I folded the note, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the table like a chess piece set down with intention. Tomorrow, I said. Tonight, we sleep. Beth's downfall came swifter than even I anticipated. By Tuesday, whispers in her company had become official memos. By Wednesday morning, she was escorted out of her office with a box of belongings, her badge clipped from her blazer by security. My son tried to soothe her in the driveway, pacing circles in that black Mercedes like a general who had lost his war map. I didn't gloat. Revenge is like wine, you don't drink it all at once. You savor, you let it breathe. I stood at my kitchen window, watering my violets, and watched them through the glass. She was screaming, he was pleading. The irony was almost poetic. She had threatened to poison me. Instead, her own career had been poisoned by her past. But my son was not Beth. He was mine, my blood, my shadow. And if Beth had been a wolf circling my door, he was the wolf I had raised without realizing what kind of hunger I had fed. He didn't just want comfort, he wanted dominion. That night, my phone rang again. His number. I hesitated, then answered. You think this is funny? His voice cracked like glass. You've ruined her. You've destroyed us. No, I said calmly. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided my living room was a film set. Actions have consequences. You're going to regret this, Mom, he spat. I swear to God you will. You can't hide behind your husband forever. I let the silence settle. Then, deliberately, I pressed the speaker button and laid the phone on the counter. Thank you for confirming your threats again, I said softly. This line is recorded. He went silent for a beat. Then the call ended. I filed the recording into my growing folder. Someday, these files would speak louder than I ever could. By Thursday, I executed phase 2 completely. I called the university and informed them I would no longer be paying tuition for my son's graduate program. I'm withdrawing all financial responsibility, I told the bursar. He's an adult now. He'll manage. That same day, I walked into the dealership with my lawyer and reclaimed the car. The black SUV my son flaunted around the city, mine, title and all. He hadn't known I was still paying the balance. He thought it was his. When I drove it home myself, I parked it deliberately in front of our mansion, right beside the roses, where Beth would see it the next Sunday. It was no longer his chariot, it was my symbol. That evening, the screaming began again. Beth's voice tore through the night air from their apartment across town. My son's voice followed, frantic, furious. I imagined their walls closing in, their shared rage like a pot left to boil without a lid. I poured myself a glass of wine and waited. By Friday morning, the storm broke. My son showed up at our front gate, pounding his fist against the iron. His hair was unkempt, his eyes wild. Open the door, Mom. Give me the car. Give me the money. My husband stood at my side. He didn't flinch. Leave, he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of decades. You're not welcome here until you learn respect. You think you can just cut me off? Our son shouted. You think you can destroy us? You've made enemies you don't even understand. My husband didn't move. He only reached for the gate's intercom button. Go back to your wife, he said. Before we call the police. Our son's face twisted. He spit on the ground, then stormed away. I knew what came next. Desperation. Desperation breeds mistakes. That night, I drafted the final piece of my plan, the release of his recorded threats. I wouldn't do it blindly, I would do it strategically, where it would cut the deepest. His industry, the logistics world, thrived on compliance, reputation, and clean records. A whisper of misconduct could blackball a man for life. But I wouldn't release everything at once. No. This would be drops of water on stone, eroding his foundation bit by bit. First, the voicemail where he demanded I repay him for the tenants I had robbed him of. Then the one where he swore accidents could happen. Finally, the tirade from that very week, in which his threats had grown bolder, harsher. Every drop timed, every drop lethal. And then fate delivered me something I hadn't even asked for. My husband's friend, the attorney, called with a proposal. There are blacklists, he said. Not the ones you find online. The ones whispered from landlord to landlord, company to company. If you want, I can make sure your son and his wife are flagged everywhere that matters. They won't rent. They won't get credit. They won't work. I hesitated. Even after everything, a mother's heart resists annihilation. But then I remembered the tree, the documents, the mockery of a birthday gift. Yes, I whispered. Do it. Make sure they never forget what it means to bury your own mother alive. My husband took my hand. His grip was steady. Phase 3 begins, he said. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt safe. The blacklist worked faster than wildfire. By Monday morning, my son called in a panic. His voice trembled, but his pride forced him to mask it with rage. Mom, you don't understand what's happening. Our lease, terminated. Beth's applications rejected. Every landlord says the same thing. We don't rent to people like you. What the hell did you do? I let him shout, pacing across my kitchen with the phone pressed against my palm. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air. My violets bloomed quietly on the windowsill. What I did, I said evenly, was survive. Something you never thought I'd have the strength to do. You ruined us, he roared. Do you know how humiliating this is? Hotels every night, money bleeding out of our accounts. I cut him off. You once drove me to a cemetery and told me to pick my grave. Do you remember? Or should I remind you what shade tree you chose for me? The line went silent. Then he hung up. That same evening, Beth appeared in our driveway. Not in the black Mercedes that had already been repossessed by the dealer, but in a cab, her face pale, her eyes ringed with sleepless nights. She marched up the porch steps like a soldier approaching enemy lines. You've destroyed everything, she hissed the moment I opened the door. My job. Our home. Our lives. Are you proud of yourself? I didn't flinch. Pride has nothing to do with it. Protection does. You wanted me dead, Beth. I heard you. You said my milk could be poisoned. You planted that seed, not me. Her jaw tightened. You're a bitter old woman clinging to bricks and memories. But you can't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, you'll have to leave that house. And when you do... I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut glass. When I do, Beth, I'll leave by choice, not by threat. And if you think I won't defend myself to the very last breath, you've underestimated the wrong woman. For the first time, her bravado cracked. She turned, stormed down the steps, and slammed the cab door behind her. I watched the taillights fade. My husband stepped beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders. She's unraveling, he murmured. Yes, I said. And so is he. By midweek, the blacklist had spread like an infection. My son called again. This time his voice was stripped of rage. It was hollow, desperate. Mom, they fired me. The company says my license is revoked. No one will touch me now. Every recruiter, every HR department, they all say no. I can't even get an interview. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of his words. It wasn't joy I felt. It was justice, heavy and merciless. You chose this path, I said softly. When you threatened me, when you stood by while Beth mocked me, when you put strangers in my grandmother's home to profit from filth, you wrote this ending yourself. Please, he whispered, and for the first time since he was a boy, I heard the tremor of real fear in his voice. Help us. We don't know where to go. We can't stay in hotels forever. We're running out of money. I stayed silent long enough for him to feel the weight of my refusal. Then I said, maybe you should have thought about that before buying me a grave instead of a cake. The line went dead. That night, I stood by the window of our bedroom, looking out at the garden glowing faintly under the moonlight. My husband joined me, his expression unreadable. Do you regret it? He asked finally. I shook my head. No. Regret is for mistakes. This was survival. This was teaching them the lesson we should have taught years ago, that life doesn't hand you palaces and wealth just because you demand them. You earn it. You fight for it. And if you threaten to bury me alive, then you should be ready to be buried by your own greed. He took my hand. Then let's finish it. Yes, I said, my eyes narrowing as I imagined my son and Beth dragging their suitcases from hotel to hotel, doors slamming in their faces, money draining away like sand through a glass. Phase 4 begins. The next phase wasn't about stripping away money or possessions. That part was already in motion, bleeding them dry with every hotel bill, every rejection letter, every landlord slamming the door. Phase 4 was about reputation, the one thing my son still thought he could salvage. He had always carried himself like a man untouchable. At family dinners, he boasted about his connections, how everyone in his industry respected him, how he was destined to build an empire. Even Beth fed that illusion, calling him our future CEO as though the words themselves had weight. But illusions are delicate things. One whisper, one shadow, and they collapse. I still had the voicemails. Not the angry ones everyone had already heard. No, these were different. Calculated. Cold. In one, my son bragged about falsifying delivery logs. Everyone does it, Mom. It's just how you stay ahead. If the regulators ever checked, they'd fine us to hell, but they won't. I've got people who know how to make things disappear. Another captured him laughing with Beth about the cemetery stunt. Did you see her face? Priceless. She's so easy to scare. A little push and she'll hand us the keys. I listened to them again and again, each time reminding myself that this wasn't vengeance for vengeance's sake. This was proof. Evidence of who he had become when no one else was listening. I packaged the clips carefully, stripped of identifying markers, but heavy with enough detail that no one in his network could mistake the voice. I uploaded them to an anonymous whistleblower inbox connected to his former industry watchdog. Within hours, I saw the thread ignite. Comments poured in. If this is real, he's finished. No wonder his license was revoked. People like this make the rest of us look corrupt. The empire he bragged about was now ash before it had even been built. Meanwhile, Beth was unraveling in her own way. Stripped of her career, she tried clawing her way back into respectability. She called old colleagues, begged for second chances, even hinted that she was a victim of sabotage. But the photos spoke louder than her excuses. Screenshots never disappear. And when one of her former bosses saw her name, he told her coldly, "We don't work with liabilities." I didn't leak more than necessary. I wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. I let the world do what it always does, devour weakness once exposed. But my son? He refused to bow. Pride turned him reckless. On the second Sunday after the blacklist spread, he showed up again. No car this time. No Mercedes, no SUV. Just him, dragging his feet up the driveway, his shirt untucked, his face pale and gaunt. My husband met him at the gate. "You're not welcome here," he said firmly. "Dad, please," my son begged, voice hoarse. "I just need a chance. We're broke. Hotels are kicking us out. No one will hire us. We can't even get a credit card. Please, just let us stay in the cottage. Just until we get back on our feet." The cottage. The rotting, forgotten place he once wanted to shove us into. I stepped forward then, standing beside my husband. "No," I said simply. His eyes darkened. "You're my parents. You can't do this to me." "You did this to yourself," I replied. "You tried to bury me alive before my time. Now the earth is crumbling under your feet. That's justice." He pressed his forehead against the iron bars of the gate, his shoulders shaking. For a moment, I thought he might cry. But when he lifted his head, his eyes burned with something else. "This isn't over," he whispered. "You'll see. You think you've won, but you've just made me desperate." "Then be careful," I said. "Desperation makes men careless. And careless men destroy themselves." He staggered back, then turned and disappeared down the street. That night, as I stood at the window watching the moon climb above the dogwood tree, my husband spoke quietly beside me. "We've taken everything from them," he said. "Money, career, reputation, even shelter. What comes next?" I breathed deeply, letting the night air cool the fire in my chest. "Next comes silence," I said. "Let them feel the emptiness they tried to gift me at the cemetery. Let them see what it's like when no door opens, no hand reaches out, no light waits at the end of the hall." He nodded slowly. "You've turned the tables." "No," I whispered. "I've only set them up right. Now they have to play their own game. And they'll lose, because they've never learned how to live without cheating." I turned off the light and left the window. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield was mine. The silence I'd promised didn't last long. Desperate people can't stand silence, it echoes too loudly. Within a week, my son and Beth were knocking on every door they thought still cracked open for them. Old friends, distant relatives, anyone who once shook their hand at a wedding or toasted them at a party. But doors didn't just close, they slammed. My attorney friend had been thorough. Credit? Blocked. Employment background checks? Poisoned. Rental applications? Rejected before the ink dried. They were ghosts already, but ghosts who still had to eat, still had to sleep, still had to pretend they were alive. By Thursday, the calls started again. First my son. "Mom, we'll pay you back," he said, voice ragged. "Just let us stay in the cottage. We'll fix it up ourselves. We'll make it livable." I pictured Beth, who once sneered that 2 bedrooms were enough for us, scrubbing mildew from the cottage bathroom. The irony was almost too perfect. "No," I told him. "That house is ours. You're not welcome there." Then Beth called. Her tone was different, not begging, but venomous. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You've destroyed your own son. Do you feel holy about that? Proud? People will find out what you did. They'll call you cruel. They'll say you broke your own blood." "Better broken than buried," I answered, and ended the call. But I knew Beth. She wasn't one to wither quietly. She had the kind of mind that plotted even in defeat. And I wasn't wrong. That Sunday, as my husband and I returned from church, we saw them. My son and Beth, standing on the edge of our property like trespassers. Their clothes were wrinkled, their faces sunken from nights in cheap motels. Yet their eyes glittered with something feral. Beth stepped forward first. "We want one last conversation," she said. "No," I said, moving toward the door. My son raised a hand. "Just listen, Mom. Please." His voice cracked, not from humility, but from hunger. "We have nothing left," he said. "No job, no home, no money. Do you want us to die on the street? Is that what you want?" I stared at him, my heart tugging against the bars I had built around it. For a moment, I almost wavered. Almost. Then I remembered the cemetery, the red bow on the Mercedes, the way he had smiled when he said, "If you don't want to end up here before New Year's, give us the house." "You chose this road," I said coldly. "You paved it with greed. Now walk it." Beth's face twisted. "You're evil. Do you know that? I told him we should have finished you when we had the chance." My husband's hand tightened around mine. "Leave," he said. "Or we'll call the police." They stood frozen, rage pulsing off them like heat. Then Beth spat at the ground, grabbed my son's arm, and dragged him down the driveway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the darkened halls of the mansion, my slippers whispering against polished wood. My husband sat in the library, reading, but I could see the worry on his face. "They're cornered animals now," he said. "And cornered animals bite." "I know," I whispered. That was when I realized it wasn't enough to strip them of money and reputation. I had to make sure they could never rise again, not here, not anywhere. The blacklist had already closed doors in Connecticut, New York, and Boston. But what if they ran further? California, Texas, maybe even abroad? They'd try. I knew they would. So I made a decision. I called my attorney friend again. "I don't want them to slip through the cracks," I told him. "I want every state, every lender, every employer who matters to know exactly who they are and what they've done." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That can be arranged. But Susan, this won't just clip their wings. It will chain them to the ground. Forever." "Good," I said. "Let them feel the weight of the grave they dug for me." By the following week, the final wave hit. My son's name appeared on industry do not hire lists coast to coast. Beth's scandal resurfaced again on social media, this time picked up by bloggers who lived for stories of fallen executives. Their faces spread like wildfire, the disgraced couple who once thought they could inherit a mansion by force. Suddenly, they couldn't even hide. Hotels refused to take their money. Banks froze their accounts. Employers blocked their resumes before interviews were even scheduled. One night, just past midnight, I heard tires on gravel outside. I pulled back the curtain and saw them sitting in a borrowed car at the end of the driveway, headlights off, staring at the house. "Are they watching us?" my husband asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "But they're not predators anymore. They're shadows. And shadows can't hurt us." I closed the curtain and turned away. By the end of that month, my son and Beth were gone. Disappeared. No calls. No visits. No more begging at the gate. Just silence. But I knew silence doesn't mean peace. It means storm. And somewhere I could feel them, plotting one last desperate move. The silence lasted 3 weeks. Long enough for me to start breathing easier, to believe maybe, just maybe, they had accepted their fate and vanished into another state. But silence is a liar. It doesn't mean peace. It means plotting. It was a Friday evening when the first sign came. My husband and I returned from dinner with friends to find the side gate of the mansion unlatched. Not broken, not forced, just slightly ajar, as if a careless hand had forgotten to close it. My husband frowned. I locked that this morning. I walked through the garden slowly, my skin prickling. The roses were undisturbed, the furniture on the terrace untouched. And yet, I felt eyes. Watching. Measuring. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening for every creak, every rustle. At 3 a.m., I heard it, the faint crunch of gravel, footsteps retreating down the driveway. When I rushed to the window, I saw nothing but shadows. The next morning, a note slid under our door. You don't win, Mom. You never win. If we can't have the house, no one will. I showed it to my husband, and his jaw tightened. They're escalating. We need to involve the police. But I shook my head. The police will ask for proof. Without it, they'll file a report and forget it. We need something stronger. Something permanent. That was when I remembered the recordings. Not just the threats about money or tuition, but the new ones. My phone had caught their words the last Sunday they stood outside our gate, Beth hissing about how they should have finished me when they had the chance. It was enough. Enough to prove intention. Enough to ruin them completely. I called my attorney. Prepare everything, I said. If they try again, I want a restraining order so tight they won't be able to breathe near this property. But I didn't expect how quickly desperation would push them over the edge. The following week, as my husband worked in the garden, I stepped into the kitchen and froze. The back door was wide open. A chair had been knocked over. And on the counter, my gallon of milk, cap twisted half off. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The old words echoed in my head. I'd put a lock on your fridge. I grabbed the bottle, poured a small glass into the sink. The liquid looked normal, smelled normal. But fear isn't about sight or scent, it's about instinct. I called the police. When they arrived, I gave them everything. The note, the open gate, the recordings, the milk. They promised to test it, though they doubted anything would turn up. Even if it doesn't, I said firmly, you'll have the threats. You'll have the motive. And I'll have the truth. That night, my husband sat beside me on the porch, his arms steady around my shoulders. You've already broken them, he said softly. But now, Susan, they're dangerous. A cornered wolf will attack even if it dies trying. I nodded, staring at the stars. Then let's make sure their last attack is their undoing. 2 days later, the police returned. Their tests showed no toxins in the milk. But the officer's expression was grave. Even without poison, Mrs. Langford, you've got enough here to secure protection. The note, the recordings, it paints a picture. If they come within 100 yards of you again, we can arrest them. Do you want to move forward? Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. But even as I signed the papers, I knew it wasn't enough. A restraining order keeps people away. It doesn't stop them from destroying what they can't have. And my son's words burned in my mind. If we can't have the house, no one will. That weekend, we took precautions. Security cameras. Motion lights. Stronger locks. My husband slept lighter than ever, waking at every sound. But nothing happened. No notes, no open gates, no footsteps in the night. Just quiet. Too quiet. Until Tuesday. I was in the study when the smoke alarm shrieked. My heart lurched. I ran into the hall and smelled it burning. Sharp, acrid, undeniable. In the backyard, by the rose bushes, flames licked at the edge of our shed. Someone had poured accelerant. Someone had tried to burn us out. My husband and I fought the fire with the hose until the fire department arrived. It didn't spread far, only the shed was destroyed. But the message was clear. This wasn't about scaring me anymore. This was war. That night, as the ashes smoldered outside, I sat at the kitchen table with my leather notebook. My pen hovered, then pressed hard to the page. Phase 5, final strike. They wanted me buried, I whispered to myself. But it's them who will never rise again. My husband came in, his face still streaked with soot. He placed his hand on mine. How? He asked simply. I met his eyes. By showing the world the truth about them. Not whispers, not forums, not hidden files. Public. Irrefutable. Everywhere. And in that moment, the plan for their ultimate undoing was born. The shed still smelled of smoke days later, a bitter perfume of betrayal. I walked past the charred remains every morning, each time reminding myself, this wasn't just arson. It was a declaration. If we can't have the house, no one will. But they hadn't counted on one thing. The fire hadn't just burned wood and paint. It had burned away my last hesitation. I was done playing defense. It was time for the final strike. I began with the recordings. The cemetery threats, the phone calls, Beth's whisper about poison, my son's laughter about scaring me into handing over the keys, all neatly labeled, time-stamped, and transferred to a secure drive. Then the photographs of the burned shed, the police report, the restraining order. I packaged it all into a single dossier. Not hidden, not whispered, not anonymous this time. This time it would be public, undeniable, and loud enough to echo across every corner of their lives. But I didn't want to upload it myself. That would make it personal. Instead, I reached out to a journalist, a woman I once mentored through our church outreach program, now working for a regional paper with a knack for exposing corruption. When she answered my call, I kept my voice steady. I have a story for you. A family tragedy. A son who tried to bury his parents alive, literally. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you have proof?" "I have everything." We met in a cafe 2 towns over. I slid the folder across the table. She read in silence, her face hardening with every page. When she reached the end, she exhaled slowly. This is explosive. "You know what will happen if I run this?" "Yes," I said. "They'll never recover." She studied me for a long moment. "And you're ready for that?" I thought of the cemetery, of Beth's hiss in my ear, of the smoke curling from the shed. I've been ready since the day they bought me a grave plot for my birthday. The article broke on Sunday morning. The headline was brutal, the kind that stops readers mid-scroll. Couple accused of terrorizing elderly parents, threats, arson, and a cemetery plot as a gift. The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up. Online forums dissected every detail. Neighbors whispered. Former colleagues nodded knowingly. Even strangers rallied to my defense, flooding the comment sections with outrage. Who does this to their own mother? Monsters. Lock them up. Beth tried to deny it online, but screenshots of her old photos resurfaced instantly. My son stayed silent, but silence screamed louder than words. By Monday afternoon, the police called. "Mrs. Langford, based on the evidence in that article, we're reopening the case. The arson, the threats, your son and daughter-in-law are now officially under investigation." That night, for the first time in months, I slept soundly. No pacing the halls, no jolting awake at phantom footsteps. Just peace. But peace is fragile. At dawn, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. A male voice, low and tired, spoke on the other end. "Mom, it's me." I froze. "What do you want?" I wanted to say goodbye," he whispered. "They're everywhere. Reporters, police, landlords. We can't go anywhere. We're done. Finished. I just thought you should know." "Goodbye?" I asked sharply. Silence. Then the line went dead. Panic surged through me. Was it a threat? A plea? A warning? My husband found me gripping the phone, my knuckles white. I told him what our son had said. His face went pale, but his voice was firm. "This isn't over." That wasn't a farewell. That was a seed. "He's planning something." I nodded, fear coiling tight in my chest. "Then we have to be ready." 2 nights later, the knock came. Not polite. Not frantic. Just 3 steady pounds on the front door. My husband and I exchanged a look, then he whispered, "Stay back." He opened the door with the chain still latched. And there they were. My son and Beth, shadows of who they once were. Their clothes dirty, their faces hollow, their eyes wild. Beth smiled, but it was the smile of a cornered animal. "We came to settle this," she said. My son leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "If we can't have peace, neither can you." I felt the weight of the moment, heavy as earth on a coffin. The final strike was no longer mine to plan, it was already here, standing on my doorstep. And I knew, whatever happened next would decide everything. The night air was thick, pressing against the windows as if the house itself held its breath. My husband kept the chain latched, his hands steady on the doorframe, but I could feel his body tense like a drawn bow. Beth's smile didn't falter. It was wrong on her face now, too sharp, too wide. "You've ruined us, Susan," she hissed. "No money, no job, no future. But tonight we ruin you." My son stood behind her, silent, his eyes sunken and dark. He looked less like the boy I raised and more like a stranger wearing his skin. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. "Go," my husband said, his voice like iron. "You're not welcome here. The police have the recordings, the threats, the evidence. You take one more step, you'll be arrested." Beth leaned in closer, whispering through the crack of the door. "Arrested? You think jail scares us more than starving? More than being blacklisted everywhere we turn? You left us no choice." My pulse hammered. I thought of the burned shed, of the open gate, of the milk left waiting on the counter. They weren't bluffing. I stepped forward, placing a hand on my husband's arm. "Let me," I whispered. He hesitated, then nodded, keeping the chain tight but giving me the space to speak. I looked straight into my son's hollow eyes. "You came here to finish what you started at the cemetery, didn't you? To bury me alive, this time without the paperwork." He flinched. For a second, just a second, I saw the boy he had been, the boy who once clung to me after nightmares, begging me to promise monsters weren't real. Now he had become one. Beth sneered. "Stop with your theatrics. We just want what's ours." "This house isn't yours," I said, my voice steady. "It was never yours. And the more you try to steal it, the more you bury yourselves. Look around you. You've lost everything because you wanted everything. That's not inheritance. That's greed. That's rot." Beth slammed her hand against the doorframe, making the chain rattle. "Enough. Hand over the keys, or what?" I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. "You'll burn another shed? Poison another bottle? Threaten me again? Go ahead. Every word you say is another nail in your own coffin. Cameras are on. Police are listening. You've already lost." For a long moment, there was silence. Beth's smile cracked, her bravado peeling away like old paint. But my son, he just stood there, staring at me with those empty eyes. Finally, he whispered, "You'll regret this." "No," I answered softly. "The only thing I regret is raising a son who forgot what love was." His mouth twitched as if he wanted to argue, but no words came. He turned sharply, grabbed Beth's arm, and pulled her down the steps. Their figures melted into the dark, swallowed by the night. We called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, they reviewed the footage from our new security cameras, Beth pounding the door, her threats recorded crystal clear, my son standing silently, complicit. The restraining order was enough to put them both in cuffs. I watched from the porch as they were led away, Beth spitting curses, my son keeping his head down, his shoulders sagging. The red and blue lights painted their faces like a cruel spotlight. My husband squeezed my hand. "It's over," he whispered. But I wasn't sure. Prison is a cage, yes. But cages open. Desperation finds cracks. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my leather notebook, staring at the page titled Phase 5, Final Strike. I crossed it out and wrote another, Phase 6, Aftermath. Because the truth was, revenge hadn't just destroyed them. It had changed me too. My son was gone, not just to prison, but to the darkness he had chosen long before. Beth was stripped of everything, yet still venomous. And I was left with ashes, documents, and memories of the boy I used to love. I closed the notebook, my chest heavy but steady. "They wanted me buried," I whispered. "But I'm still here. And I'll be here long after they're gone." The roses outside trembled in the night wind, petals falling like small, quiet victories. The trial came faster than I expected. The article had already primed the town, and the footage from our cameras sealed the case like nails in a coffin. Beth and my son were charged with harassment, arson, and violation of a restraining order. Neighbors who once smiled politely at me in church pews now leaned in closer, whispering, "We had no idea." Some offered casseroles, others letters of support. The same community that had watched us silently for years now treated me as if I were their symbol, proof that no mother should ever be terrorized by her own child. The courtroom was crowded on the first day of hearings. I wore my navy blue dress, the one my husband always said made me look unshakable. When I walked to the witness stand, I kept my back straight and my hands steady, though inside, my heart thudded like a drum. The prosecutor asked simple questions about the cemetery, gift, the open milk, the shed fire, the threats. Each time, I answered clearly, my voice calm but firm. Yes, that happened. Yes, I recorded it. Yes, they tried to scare me into giving up the house. When they played the recordings aloud, the hiss of Beth warning me about poison milk, my son's cold laughter about the grave, the courtroom froze. I saw jurors shift uncomfortably, one even shaking his head in disbelief. And then Beth's voice filled the room. "If we can't have the house, no one will." The words echoed like a curse, undeniable, unforgettable. During recess, a woman I barely knew approached me. "Susan," she said softly, "you're brave. You've stood against something most of us couldn't bear." I nodded, but I didn't feel brave. I felt carved out, hollow, as though pieces of me had been chipped away every time I had to repeat the story. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about law. It was about family. About a son who should have been my protector but became my predator. And admitting that to strangers cut deeper than any knife. When the verdict came, it was decisive. Guilty. Both of them. Sentenced to years behind bars, not a lifetime, but long enough that the world outside would move on without them. Beth screamed in the courtroom, cursing me, vowing revenge. My son only hung his head. He didn't look at me once. As the guards led them away, I whispered under my breath, "You wanted me buried. But it's you who'll be buried by your choices." In the weeks that followed, the community rallied. Neighbors who had once gossiped now came with sympathy. Some called me the woman who survived her son's betrayal. Others, more quietly, confessed they had children who frightened them, children they no longer recognized. I became, unwillingly, a kind of mirror, reflecting the hidden fears of other parents. But late at night, when the house was still and the moonlight brushed across the dogwood tree outside my window, I couldn't escape the weight of it. My son's last words to me before his arrest still echoed, "You'll regret this." I wondered if he meant it as a threat, or as a truth. One evening, my husband found me sitting in the study, staring at my leather notebook. "It's over," he said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "No," I whispered. "It's paused. Prison ends. Doors open. And when they do, I have to be ready." He squeezed my hand. "Then we'll be ready together." I wrote at the top of a fresh page, Phase 7, The Return. Because I knew this story wasn't finished. Years pass slowly when you're waiting for footsteps that may never come. After the trial, the mansion became both my sanctuary and my fortress. The gardens bloomed brighter than ever, roses climbing high against the trellis, but I never walked them without glancing over my shoulder. The sound of gravel under tires, a knock at the door, even the creak of floorboards at night, each one set my nerves alight. The community remembered me kindly. At church, people asked how I was holding up, as though my son's betrayal were an illness I'd caught and was still recovering from. Neighbors sometimes left baskets on the porch, fresh bread, jars of jam, handwritten prayers. They meant well, but pity has a weight of its own. My husband carried it better than I did. He threw himself into repairing the old cottage, saying it was therapeutic. He patched the roof, painted the shutters, cleared the overgrown garden. "It's good to take something abandoned," he told me one afternoon as we stood under the shade of the dogwood, "and make it whole again." I knew he was speaking about more than the cottage. But wholeness remained a dream. Because even from prison, their shadows reached me. Letters began to arrive. Not directly, never in my mailbox, but whispered through acquaintances. A friend of a friend inquired nervously at Bible study, "Susan, did your daughter-in-law really send someone money for a phone inside?" Another time, A neighbor swore he overheard a man at the diner talking about the Langfords as if they were plotting a comeback. I dismissed some of it as gossip, but not all. Then one envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 6 words, scrawled in my son's familiar hand. "You can't hide behind walls forever." My husband wanted to hand it straight to the police. I did. They traced it to the prison mail system, but beyond confirming it was genuine, they shrugged. "It's just words," the officer said. "He can't touch you from in there." But words have power. And these words told me he wasn't done. I began to notice changes in myself. I locked every door twice. I left lights on in rooms I wasn't using. I kept a small recorder in my purse, habitually, as if I expected threats to appear in grocery aisles or parking lots. And at night, when the house was dark, I pulled out my leather notebook. On its newest page, under Phase 7, the return, I started to write. Prepare safe houses, not just the mansion, but somewhere else, somewhere secret. Network with allies, lawyers, journalists, even those who once doubted me. Track their release dates. Don't be caught off guard. Document everything, because memories fade, but paper does not. It wasn't fear that moved my pen. It was clarity. The same clarity I felt when they drove me to the cemetery and called it a gift. One autumn afternoon, I stood at the edge of our property, staring at the shed's blackened skeleton. We never rebuilt it. My husband once asked if we should, but I told him no. I wanted it there, a scar to remind us. And as the wind scattered leaves around my feet, I whispered into the empty air, "You think prison will harden you. You think revenge will give you strength. But remember this, I've already survived the grave you dug for me. And if you return, I'll survive you again." The dogwood tree swayed, white petals falling like fragments of a promise. The war wasn't finished. It was only waiting. The years slid by like rain on stone. Seasons changed, the roses bloomed and withered, and my hair turned silver. But the calendar on my wall held one date circled in red, the day of their release. That morning, I stood in the kitchen, the air thick with the scent of fresh coffee. My husband placed a newspaper on the table. Local couple released after serving sentence. Their faces stared back at me, older, harder, eyes still sharp with hunger. "They'll come," my husband said quietly. "I know," I replied. I didn't wait for them to knock this time. I was ready. The years had taught me that walls keep people out, but truth destroys them from within. I had spent those years building more than gardens. My dossier had grown into volumes, every letter, every whispered threat, every scrap of proof they had sent from behind bars. I had even gathered testimonies from other inmates who confirmed their plotting. Some spoke eagerly when offered small kindnesses, eager to distance themselves from Beth's venom and my son's bitter pride. I had fed all of it, every note, every plan, to the journalist who once broke the first story. She had been waiting, just as I had. The day they walked free, another headline thundered across the news. Released couple already under investigation. Evidence of continued harassment emerges. Photos of the letter my son sent me, "You can't hide behind walls forever," were plastered online. Inmates' sworn statements about Beth's promises to finish the job ran in bold. Their names once again filled the blacklist, this time not whispered but shouted across the country. Instead of freedom, they stepped into a storm. Reporters swarmed. Employers shut their doors. Even old acquaintances turned their backs. They were pariahs before they could even draw a breath of fresh air. But still, they came. 2 nights after their release, the doorbell rang. I knew it would. Through the glass, I saw them, tired, worn, their clothes cheap, their faces lined. Beth's eyes still burned, but my son's looked hollow, like a well gone dry. I opened the door, but only halfway. "You've destroyed us," Beth said, her voice ragged. "You made sure no one will take us, no one will hire us, no one will house us." "No," I answered. "You destroyed yourselves." I only held up the mirror. My son finally looked at me. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. For a long moment, we just stared, mother and son, a chasm of choices between us. Then he lowered his eyes. Beth grabbed his arm, furious. "Say something. Take the house," demanded. Don't stand there like a coward. But he didn't move. He didn't even raise his head. And in that silence, I understood. My son was gone, consumed by the life he chose, and what stood before me was only a shadow. Leave, I said, my voice steady. This house will never be yours. Not now, not ever. Go find your grave somewhere else. Beth screamed, curses tearing from her throat, but my son pulled her back. Without looking at me again, he turned and walked away, dragging her into the darkness. I watched them go, their silhouettes shrinking until they were swallowed by the night. That was the last time I saw them. Weeks later, word spread they had fled the state. Rumors said they lived in motels, drifting from town to town, their names red flags wherever they went. Some said Beth left him. Others whispered they were still together, plotting new schemes. But me? I stopped caring. Because the war was over, not with fire, not with poison, not with graves, but with truth. I sit now on the porch of the mansion, the dogwood tree swaying in the evening breeze, petals scattering like confetti at a celebration. My husband reads beside me, the garden alive with color. They wanted me buried. But I remain. And I will remain long after their shadows fade.